You watch others always seem to be one step ahead, while you're constantly playing catch-up and reacting to their moves. Every time you think you have a plan, someone else has already seen it coming and blocked your path before you even start. I am Sun Tzu, the ancient warrior who turned being outnumbered into victory and proved you can win without even fighting. What I learned about outsmarting your opponents will show you how to stay ahead of anyone trying to outmaneuver you. The same strategies that won battles 2,500 years ago will help you win at life today. But first, like this video, subscribe for more winning strategies, and comment where you're watching from. I want to see how far this wisdom needs to travel. I was born into a world of constant warfare, where the strong devoured the weak and only the clever survived. In ancient China, during what history calls the Warring States period, kingdoms rose and fell like waves on the shore. My father was a minor military official who taught me that strength alone never wins, it's the mind that conquers. When I was 12 years old, I witnessed something that changed my understanding of conflict forever. Two armies faced each other across a valley, and everyone expected a brutal battle. But the smaller army's general did something unexpected. Instead of charging into battle, he sent a single messenger to the enemy camp. Within hours, the larger army surrendered without a single sword being drawn. I rushed to my father and asked how this was possible. He smiled and said, "The general didn't defeat their army, he defeated their will to fight." That messenger had revealed that the larger army's supply lines were already cut. Their reinforcements were 3 days away, and their own allies were secretly negotiating surrender terms. The battle was won before it began. This moment planted a seed in my mind that would grow into everything I later wrote in The Art of War. I realized that most conflicts are lost not on the battlefield, but in the mind. People defeat themselves by reacting instead of thinking, by fighting when they should negotiate, by showing strength when they should appear weak. I spent my youth studying these patterns. I watched how merchants negotiated in the marketplace, how nobles maneuvered for position at court, how farmers dealt with disputes over land. Every human interaction was a small war with winners and losers. The winners weren't always the strongest or the richest. They were the ones who understood the game being played. I began collecting what I called my bamboo scrolls of wisdom, observations about human nature, strategic principles, and the patterns that determine victory and defeat. These weren't just military tactics, but insights into how people think, react, and make decisions under pressure. The more I studied, the more I understood that life itself is one continuous strategic challenge. Every conversation is a negotiation. Every decision is a move on an invisible board. Every relationship is an alliance that can strengthen or weaken your position. People who feel constantly outmaneuvered don't lack intelligence or strength. They lack understanding of the strategic principles that govern all human interaction. This early understanding led me to my first great strategic principle, one that would become the foundation of everything else I learned about winning in life. The day I realized I was my own worst enemy was the day I truly began to understand strategy. I was 25 years old, commanding my first significant military campaign. I had studied every tactical manual, memorized every historical battle, and felt confident in my preparation. Yet I was losing. My enemy was a grizzled veteran who seemed to anticipate my every move. Every strategy I employed, he countered before I could fully execute it. My frustration grew with each failed attempt until I made a critical error. I attacked out of anger rather than logic. The result was a devastating defeat that cost me half my men and nearly my life. That night, sitting alone in my tent, I took out a smooth riverstone I had carried since childhood. I used it for reflection, turning it over in my hands while I thought deeply about my failures. As I examined that stone, I realized I had been examining everything except the most important factor in my defeat: myself. I had studied my enemy's tactics, his troop movements, his supply lines, but I had never honestly examined my own patterns, my own weaknesses, my own predictable responses. I was fighting blind, not because I couldn't see my opponent, but because I couldn't see myself clearly. I began what I call the brutal inventory, a completely honest assessment of my strengths and weaknesses. I realized I was impatient, prone to anger when challenged, and too proud to retreat even when retreat was the wise choice. I discovered I had predictable patterns that any skilled opponent could exploit. I was telegraphing my moves through my emotional reactions. More importantly, I realized that most people go through life making the same mistake I had made. They focus entirely on external obstacles: their difficult boss, their competitive colleagues, their challenging circumstances, while remaining blind to their own self-defeating patterns. True strategic awareness begins with self-knowledge. You must understand your own emotional triggers, your decision-making patterns, your strengths and limitations. You must know which situations make you reactive instead of responsive, which people can manipulate your emotions, and which circumstances cloud your judgment. I developed a daily practice of what I called strategic self-assessment. Each morning, I would ask myself 3 questions. What are my emotional weak spots today? What patterns am I falling into? What assumptions am I making without evidence? This practice saved my life countless times and became the foundation of my strategic thinking. In your modern world, this principle is even more crucial. People are constantly trying to trigger your emotions, distract your attention, and manipulate your responses. Social media, news, workplace politics, designed to make you reactive rather than strategic. The person who knows themselves deeply cannot be easily manipulated or outmaneuvered. Self-knowledge isn't about self-criticism or dwelling on weaknesses. It's about understanding your personal operating system so you can upgrade it. When you know your own patterns, you can change them. When you understand your triggers, you can control them. Once you know yourself, you must learn to see others with equal clarity. I learned to read people the way a sailor reads the wind, by watching the subtle signs that reveal what's coming next. In ancient China, your life depended on understanding whether the person across from you was friend or foe, confident or fearful, trustworthy or deceptive. I developed what I called my jade compass of character, an internal guidance system that pointed not toward magnetic north, but toward people's true motivations and intentions. The breakthrough came during a diplomatic mission to a neighboring kingdom. I was negotiating the release of prisoners, and across the table sat a minister who spoke of peace while his eyes revealed war. His words were conciliatory, but his body language told a different story. He kept glancing toward the door. His hands fidgeted with a small knife, and most tellingly, he agreed to my terms too quickly. I realized he was stalling, buying time for something. I excused myself and discovered that troops were already moving to surround our position. His negotiation was a distraction while they prepared to capture us. By reading the signals he couldn't control, I saved not just my life, but avoided a war that would have cost thousands of lives. This experience taught me that people constantly broadcast their intentions through signals they don't realize they're sending. Fear has a smell, confidence has a posture, and deception has a rhythm. The key is learning to decode these signals while managing your own. I learned to watch for what I called the 3 revelations. First, the gap between what people say and what their body communicates. Words lie easily, but the body tells the truth. Second, the pattern of their questions. People reveal their real concerns through what they ask about and what they carefully avoid discussing. Third, their response to pressure. How someone reacts when challenged, contradicted, or put under stress reveals their true character. But reading people isn't just about detecting deception, it's about understanding motivation. Every person is driven by core needs: security, recognition, control, belonging, or purpose. When you understand someone's primary motivation, you can predict their behavior and influence their decisions. I developed a simple system for reading character. I would observe people in 3 situations: when they think they're unobserved, when they're under pressure, and when they're interacting with those who have less power than them. These 3 scenarios reveal authentic character better than any formal introduction. The most important lesson I learned is that people telegraph their next moves through their current behavior. The colleague who constantly gossips about others will eventually gossip about you. The friend who betrays confidences will betray your confidence. The leader who takes credit for others' work will take credit for your work. Past behavior is the most reliable predictor of future behavior. In your modern world, this skill is even more valuable. People hide behind digital communication, professional facades, and social media personas. But the fundamental patterns remain the same. The person who is consistently late is telling you something about their priorities. The person who interrupts constantly is revealing their need for control. The person who can't make decisions is showing you their relationship with responsibility. Understanding people isn't about judgment, it's about accurate assessment. When you can read people clearly, you can position yourself strategically in every interaction. Position determines victory before the battle begins. I learned this lesson on a mountain pass where I faced an enemy force 3 times larger than mine. Instead of meeting them on level ground where their numbers would overwhelm us, I positioned my army on higher ground where their size became a disadvantage. They had to attack uphill in narrow formation, while we could rain arrows down upon them from protected positions. I carried a small carved mountain token to remind me of this principle always. Seek the high ground, literally and figuratively. The enemy never reached our position. They exhausted themselves in the attempt and eventually retreated, demoralized and defeated. I won that battle without losing a single soldier, not because I was stronger, but because I was positioned better. This principle revolutionized how I approached every conflict. I realized that most people fight from weak positions because they react to situations rather than creating them. They accept whatever battlefield their opponents choose, instead of choosing their own terms of engagement. Strategic positioning means never accepting unfavorable terms. In negotiations, I would arrive early to choose my seat always, with my back to a wall, facing the entrance, with natural light behind me. Small details, but they created psychological advantages. I would study the location beforehand, understand the acoustics, know the exits. These weren't accidents. They were strategic choices that gave me subtle control over the environment. I learned to position myself in relationships the same way. Instead of competing directly with rivals, I would position myself as indispensable to their success. Instead of fighting for recognition, I would position myself as the person who recognized others' achievements. Instead of demanding authority, I would position myself as the reliable person others naturally turn to for guidance. The key insight is that position is more powerful than strength. A skilled archer positioned correctly can defeat a charging cavalry. A wise advisor positioned close to power can influence kingdoms. A knowledgeable employee positioned as the go-to expert can advance faster than harder workers who remain invisible. In your modern world, positioning is about creating scenarios where your natural strengths give you advantages. If you're naturally analytical, position yourself where analysis is valued. If you're naturally collaborative, position yourself where teamwork is essential. If you're naturally innovative, position yourself where creativity is rewarded. Strategic positioning also means avoiding fights you can't win. I never engaged enemy forces when when they had overwhelming advantages unless I could change the terms of engagement. Similarly, you should never accept battles on your opponent's terms. If someone tries to compete with you in their area of strength, redirect the competition to your area of strength. The most sophisticated form of positioning is making yourself necessary rather than just useful. Useful people can be replaced. Necessary people cannot. I positioned myself as necessary to my rulers, not just as a military commander, but as a strategic advisor who could see patterns and possibilities others missed. This requires thinking several moves ahead before accepting any position, whether it's a job, a relationship, or a commitment. Task yourself, what opportunities does this create? What limitations does this impose? How does this position me for future moves? Good positioning is worthless without perfect timing, which brings us to the next crucial principle. I learned the deadly importance of timing during what should have been my easiest victory. My scouts reported that the enemy army was divided, with half their forces separated by a river and unable to reunite for 3 days. It seemed like the perfect opportunity to strike the smaller force and defeat them before reinforcements arrived. I moved immediately, thinking speed was the key, but I moved too soon. My attack came just as they were expecting reinforcements, not 3 days later, as my scouts had reported. What I thought was perfect timing was actually terrible timing based on incomplete information. I had confused urgency with opportunity. That failure taught me to carry what I call my hourglass of opportunity, a mental timing device that measures not minutes, but moments of strategic advantage. I learned that early action can be as deadly as late action. Timing isn't about being first. It's about being precise. The perfect moment to act is when 3 conditions align. Your preparation is complete, your opponent is vulnerable, and external circumstances favor your success. Miss any of these elements, and even the best strategy will fail. I developed a discipline of patient observation. Before any major decision, I would wait and watch for the signs that indicated perfect timing. I looked for patterns in my opponent's behavior, cycles in their energy and attention, and moments when their defenses were naturally lowered. Most people act too quickly because they confuse motion with progress. They feel pressure to do something, so they do anything. This reactive approach guarantees poor timing. Strategic timing requires the emotional discipline to wait for the right moment, even when others are pressuring you to act. I also learned to create the perfect moment instead of waiting for it. Sometimes the conditions you need don't exist. Naturally, you must create them. I would deliberately create situations that forced my opponents into predictable responses, then time my real moves to capitalize on their reactions. The key insight is that timing isn't about calendar time. It's about psychological time. The best moment to ask for a promotion isn't after you've worked there for a year, but when your value is most obvious to your boss. The best moment to negotiate isn't when you need something, but when you have leverage. The best moment to launch a project isn't when you're ready, but when the market is ready. In your modern world, timing is even more crucial because everything moves faster. Opportunities appear and disappear in hours, not days. But the fundamental principles remain the same. Watch for cycles in people's attention, energy, and receptivity. Learn to recognize when someone is most open to influence, most likely to say yes, most vulnerable to competitive pressure. Perfect timing also means knowing when not to act. Sometimes the best strategy is to wait while others exhaust themselves with poorly timed moves. Patience is a warrior's greatest weapon, but sometimes the best victory is the one where you never fight at all. My greatest victory was one where no blood was shed, no swords were drawn, and no army marched. I defeated an enemy force of 30,000 men with nothing but carefully crafted reputation and precisely timed information. This became the foundation of my most famous principle, the supreme excellence is to subdue your enemy without fighting. The situation seemed impossible. A rival kingdom had amassed a massive army and was preparing to invade our territory. Our forces were outnumbered 4-1, and our defenses were insufficient. Traditional military wisdom said we should prepare for a siege and hope for the best. I saw a different path. I had studied this enemy commander for months. He was competent but cautious, experienced but proud. Most importantly, he was under political pressure from his own king to achieve a quick, decisive victory. I realized I could use his strengths against him. Instead of preparing for battle, I began preparing for psychological warfare. I sent carefully selected information through merchant networks, diplomatic channels, and even enemy spies. I made sure he learned about our secret alliance with a neighboring kingdom, our hidden reserves of troops, and our new military technology that his scouts couldn't verify. None of this was entirely false, but none of it was entirely true either. We did have conversations with neighboring kingdoms, we did have some reserves, and we were developing new tactics, but I presented these realities in ways that made our position seem far stronger than it actually was. The crucial element was timing. I released this information gradually, allowing him to discover it through his own intelligence network. People believe what they discover themselves more than what they're told directly. By the time he received the complete picture, he had convinced himself that attacking us would be extremely costly, even if he won. Meanwhile, I made sure his own political enemies back home knew about his hesitation and excessive caution. I created pressure from both directions. Attacking us looked dangerous, but not attacking us looked weak. I had maneuvered him into a position where any choice he made would damage his reputation. The final stroke was a formal diplomatic message, offering him a face-saving alternative. I proposed a border agreement that gave him something he could present as a victory to his king while avoiding the costs of actual war. I made surrender look like negotiation. He accepted. His massive army returned home without a single battle. Our kingdom was safe, our resources were preserved, and our reputation for wisdom spread to other potential enemies. Future conflicts became easier to resolve because people knew we could win without fighting. This victory taught me that reputation is more powerful than weapons. People's perceptions of your strength matter more than your actual strength. When opponents believe you're formidable, they become reluctant to test you. When they believe you're wise, they prefer negotiation to conflict. The principle applies perfectly to modern life. The best way to handle workplace conflicts is to prevent them from becoming conflicts. The best way to deal with difficult people is to make cooperation more attractive than opposition. The best way to get what you want is to help others get what they want. This doesn't mean being passive or avoiding all confrontation. It means being strategic about when and how you engage. Sometimes showing strength prevents the need to use strength. Sometimes demonstrating capability eliminates the need to prove capability. The phantom sword I carry, the one that was never drawn, reminds me that unused power is often more powerful than used power. When people know you can fight but choose not to, they respect your restraint and fear your potential. When you must engage, however, speed becomes your greatest ally. Speed, when applied correctly, can overcome almost any disadvantage. I discovered this during what seemed like an impossible situation. Facing an enemy force twice my size with superior equipment and better defensive positions, traditional tactics said I should retreat and wait for reinforcements. Instead, I attacked with such speed and precision that the battle was over before they could organize their advantages. The key was my thunderdrummer war signal that could rally my troops to move faster than the enemy could react. But the real weapon wasn't the drum itself. It was the principle it represented. When you strike, strike like lightning. I had observed that armies, like all large organizations, move slowly. They require time to communicate, time to coordinate, and time to adjust to changing circumstances. Their size, which should have been an advantage, became a liability when faced with rapid, decisive action. My attack came at dawn, from 3 directions simultaneously, targeting their communication centers and supply points rather than their main force. By the time their commanders understood what was happening and began issuing orders, we had already achieved our objectives and begun withdrawing. They spent the entire day trying to respond to an attack that was already over. This victory taught me that hesitation is the death of strategy. Once you have decided on a course of action, execute it with complete commitment and maximum speed. Half-hearted attacks fail not because they're wrong, but because they're slow. The lightning strike principle has 3 essential elements: complete preparation, rapid execution, and immediate follow-through. You prepare thoroughly in private, strike swiftly when the moment comes, and press your advantage before your opponent can recover. In modern life, this principle is even more powerful because most people have become comfortable with slow decision-making and gradual implementation. They research endlessly, seek multiple opinions, and wait for perfect conditions. This gives enormous advantages to those who can move quickly and decisively. I've seen people lose incredible opportunities because they needed more time to think about it. While they were thinking, someone else was acting. The job went to the person who applied immediately, not the most qualified candidate who waited a week. The business deal went to the company that could close quickly, not the one with the best terms who needed extensive approval processes. But speed without preparation is just recklessness. The lightning strike principle requires extensive preparation. Before the moment of action, I would spend weeks planning an attack that lasted hours. Every detail was considered, every contingency prepared, every signal planned. When the moment came, execution was just implementing a thoroughly rehearsed plan. The balance between speed and wisdom comes from understanding the difference between decisions that are reversible and those that are not. For reversible decisions, move fast and adjust as you go. For irreversible decisions, prepare thoroughly but still execute quickly once you're ready. Most importantly, speed creates momentum. Success builds on success, and rapid initial progress often determines final outcomes. When you move quickly, you force others to react to your timeline rather than implementing their own plans. The thunder drum principle means being ready to act decisively when opportunity appears. Preparation allows speed, and speed multiplies the power of good strategy. Speed is powerful, but misdirection is even more powerful. All warfare is based on deception. This principle, perhaps more than any other, distinguishes strategic thinking from simple problem-solving. I learned its power during a campaign where I was severely outnumbered and had to make my enemy prepare for the wrong battle entirely. My mask of many faces, ceremonial piece that appeared different from every angle, reminded me that perception shapes reality more than facts do. People respond to what they believe is true, not necessarily what is actually true. When you can control perception, you can control outcomes. The situation was desperate. Enemy scouts had accurately assessed our strength, and their commander knew he had overwhelming advantages. Any direct confrontation would result in our destruction. I needed him to make different calculations, to prepare for a different kind of battle than the one I actually intended to fight. I began a campaign of strategic misdirection. I made sure his spies observed us practicing cavalry charges while hiding our real strength in archers. I let them see supply wagons moving toward the eastern front while secretly positioning our main force to the west. I even staged heated arguments among my officers about which strategy to pursue, knowing these arguments would be reported to enemy intelligence. Most importantly, I appeared weak where I was strong and strong where I was weak. I positioned obvious defenses around our actual vulnerabilities while leaving our strongest positions apparently unguarded. I wanted him to attack where we were best prepared to defend and avoid, where we were actually vulnerable. The deception worked perfectly. He concentrated his forces against our eastern positions, expecting a cavalry battle, while we struck from the west with concentrated archer fire. His superior numbers became a disadvantage as his troops crowded together in the narrow space they thought we would defend. By the time he realized the deception, the battle was already decided. This victory taught me that deception isn't about lying, it's about managing the information your opponents use to make decisions. You can be completely truthful while still creating false impressions by controlling which truths people see and when they see them. In your modern world, this principle applies to every competitive situation: job interviews, business negotiations, workplace politics, even social interactions, all involve elements of strategic information management. You're not obligated to reveal your full strategy, your complete capabilities, or your entire thought process to people who might use that information against you. The ethical boundaries are crucial to understand. Strategic deception means controlling information to protect your interests, not harming others through false information. It means appearing less capable than you are when doing so gives you advantages, not claiming capabilities you don't possess. It means managing perceptions to avoid unnecessary conflicts, not creating conflicts through manipulation. The most sophisticated form of deception is letting people deceive themselves. I learned to present information in ways that led opponents to reach the conclusions I wanted them to reach, while believing they had discovered these insights independently. People are more committed to ideas they think they discovered than to ideas they were told. This requires understanding how people think and what biases influence their decision-making. If someone expects you to be aggressive, appearing cooperative will surprise them. If they expect you to be competitive, being collaborative will confuse them. If they expect you to be emotional, staying rational will unbalance them. The key is consistency between your deception and your underlying character. The best strategic deceptions are simply different aspects of your authentic self revealed, selectively based on circumstances. You're not becoming someone else. You're choosing which parts of yourself to emphasize. But deception without proper intelligence is just confusion. Information is more valuable than weapons. I learned this when a single piece of intelligence about enemy troop movements saved my army from walking into an ambush that would have destroyed us completely. From that day forward, I invested more resources in gathering information than in building weapons. My web of whispers, an intricate network of information sources, extended far beyond military intelligence. I had merchants who traded in enemy territories, servants who worked in rival palaces, scholars who corresponded with enemy advisors, and even children who played in enemy camps. Each thread in this web brought me pieces of a larger picture that no single source could provide. I developed 5 types of intelligence gatherers, each with specific roles. Local spies provided daily information about immediate surroundings. Internal spies worked within enemy organizations and reported on plans and morale. Converted spies were enemy agents who had been turned to work for us. Expendable spies carried false information to confuse enemies. And surviving spies were my most valuable assets, deep cover agents, who could provide long-term strategic intelligence. But the most important lesson I learned was that information gathering is useless without information analysis. Raw intelligence means nothing until you understand patterns, motivations, and implications. I spent hours each day not just collecting information, but connecting pieces to see the larger picture in your modern world. Information networks are even more crucial and much easier to build. Social media provides constant intelligence about people's thoughts, plans, and relationships. Professional networks reveal career movements and business opportunities. Industry publications show trends and competitive intelligence. Even casual conversations provide valuable insights about market conditions and organizational changes. The key is building your information network before you need it. I cultivated relationships with information sources during peaceful times so they would be available during conflicts. You should do the same. Develop relationships with people in different industries, different companies, different levels of organizations. Not to use them, but to learn from them. The art of gathering intelligence lies in asking the right questions. Instead of asking what people think, ask why they think it. Instead of asking what happened, ask what people are worried might happen. Instead of asking about current situations, ask about trends and patterns. The best intelligence often comes from understanding concerns and assumptions rather than facts and events. Most importantly, learn to listen to what people don't say, the topics someone avoids, the questions they deflect, the subjects that make them uncomfortable. These often reveal more than their actual words. Pay attention to gaps in information, inconsistencies in stories, and changes in communication patterns. But remember that information without action is just entertainment. The purpose of intelligence is to inform better decisions, not to satisfy curiosity. Every piece of information should be evaluated for its strategic value. How does this change my understanding? What opportunities does this create? What threats does this reveal? Building an information network also means being a valuable source for others. Share insights generously, connect people who should know each other, and become known as someone who understands what's really happening. When you help others stay informed, they'll help you stay informed. Information gives you power, but adapting to change keeps you alive. I learned the power of adaptation during the most dangerous moment of my military career. My carefully planned attack had failed, the enemy had surrounded us, and my original strategy was not just useless, it was actively harmful to our survival. I had to completely abandon my plan and adapt like water flowing around obstacles. The flowing river stone I carried had been shaped by centuries of water moving around it, over it, and through it. Water doesn't fight stone, it finds every crack, every weakness, every possible path, until eventually the stone is worn away. That day, facing certain defeat, I decided to become like water. Instead of fighting their encirclement, I used it. Instead of trying to break through their lines, I made them think we were trying to break through while actually preparing to slip away. Instead of maintaining rigid formations, I divided my forces into small, fluid groups that could move independently. We flowed around their strengths and through their weaknesses. By dawn, my entire army had escaped what should have been a crushing defeat. The enemy woke up to find they had surrounded empty ground. Their rigid, tactical thinking had been defeated by adaptive, strategic thinking. This experience taught me that the most flexible strategy wins. Rigid plans break under pressure, but adaptive approaches bend without breaking. The key is maintaining your core objectives while remaining completely flexible about methods. I discovered that adaptation requires 3 essential elements: constant observation, rapid decision-making, and emotional detachment from your original plan. You must watch for changes in circumstances, decide quickly how to respond, and let go of strategies that no longer serve your goals. Most people fail at adaptation because they become emotionally attached to their plans. They've invested time, energy, and ego in a particular approach, so they continue pursuing it even when circumstances have changed. This attachment to methods while losing sight of objectives is the death of strategy. The water principle taught me to remain fluid while maintaining direction. A river changes its path constantly but always flows toward the sea. Your methods should change based on circumstances, but your core purpose should remain constant. Adaptation isn't about abandoning your goals. It's about finding new ways to achieve them in your modern world. Adaptation is even more crucial because change happens faster and more frequently. Technology shifts, market conditions evolve, organizational structures change, and competitive landscapes transform rapidly. The strategies that worked last year may be obsolete this year, but adaptation isn't just about responding to external change. It's about anticipating them. Water doesn't wait for obstacles to appear before finding alternative paths. It continuously explores multiple routes simultaneously. You should develop multiple approaches to achieving your goals, not just one perfect plan. The most sophisticated form of adaptation is making others adapt to you. Instead of just responding to changes, you can create changes that force others to adapt to your new reality. This requires understanding how systems work and where small changes can create large effects. Remember that adaptation without core principles leads to chaos. Water is fluid but follows natural laws. Your adaptability should be guided by consistent values and objectives. Change your methods freely, but maintain your character and purpose. The flowing river stone reminds me that persistence and flexibility aren't opposites, they're partners. You persist in your objectives while remaining flexible about your methods. You adapt to circumstances while maintaining your direction. Adaptation requires seeing the whole battlefield, not just your part. I learned to see the whole battlefield the day I realized I was winning individual battles but losing the war. My tactical successes were actually strategic failures because I was thinking too small, reacting to immediate threats instead of seeing the larger patterns that determined ultimate victory. My eagle's eye pendant reminded me to rise above the immediate conflict and see the complete picture. From ground level, a battle looks like chaos: soldiers fighting, weapons clashing, commanders shouting orders. But from above, patterns emerge. You can see how individual skirmishes connect to larger objectives, how temporary setbacks serve long-term goals, how apparent victories might actually be strategic disasters. The breakthrough came during a campaign where I had won 3 consecutive battles but found myself in a weaker position than when I started. I had been so focused on winning each engagement that I hadn't noticed my enemy was deliberately drawing me away from my supply lines and into territory where his advantages increased with each victory I achieved. He was thinking strategically, while I was thinking tactically. He was playing a longer game with a larger vision, while I was reacting to immediate challenges. I realized that tactical brilliance without strategic vision is just elaborate failure. This experience taught me the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency is doing things right, winning battles, completing tasks, achieving short-term goals. Effectiveness is doing the right things, pursuing objectives that serve your larger purpose, making decisions that strengthen your long-term position, building advantages that compound over time. I developed what I call strategic sight, the ability to see how immediate actions connect to ultimate objectives. This requires 3 levels of vision: the immediate situation, the intermediate implications, and the long-term consequences. Most people see only the immediate level. Some see the intermediate level, but very few develop the long-term strategic vision that determines final outcomes. Strategic vision means understanding that everything is connected. Your current job isn't just about your current job, it's about building skills, relationships, and reputation that will serve future opportunities. Your current relationships aren't just about current benefits. They're about creating networks that will provide value for decades. Your current decisions aren't just about current results. They're about establishing patterns that will define your character and capabilities. The most important insight is that strategy isn't just about competition. It's about positioning yourself in systems that are bigger than any individual conflict. While others fight over immediate advantages, Strategic thinkers position themselves to benefit from long-term trends, while others react to changes. Strategic thinkers anticipate and prepare for changes. In your modern world, strategic vision is more crucial than ever because systems are more complex and changes happen faster. The decision you make today in one area of your life can have unexpected consequences in completely different areas months or years later. The person you meet casually today might become crucial to your success 5 years from now. The skill you develop as a hobby might become the foundation of your career. Strategic vision also means understanding leverage points places where small actions can create large effects. Instead of trying to change everything, strategic thinkers identify the key factors that influence multiple outcomes. They focus their energy on changes that create cascading benefits rather than isolated improvements. This requires thinking in systems, not just events. Events are what happen. Systems are why they happen. Strategic thinkers focus on understanding and influencing the underlying systems that generate events rather than just reacting to the events themselves. Vision without the ability to execute is just dreaming. Perfect plans fail without perfect execution. I learned this harsh lesson when my most brilliant strategy collapsed because my officers couldn't implement it properly under pressure. The plan was flawless on paper, but it required precise timing, coordinated movements, and split-second decisions that looked simple in theory but proved impossible in practice. My craftsman's hammer, perfectly balanced for precise work, reminded me that execution requires the same careful attention to detail as planning. A skilled craftsman doesn't just design beautiful objects, he develops the technique and discipline to create them consistently, even under difficult conditions. The failure taught me that planning and execution are different skills requiring different approaches. Planning is intellectual. You can do it alone, in comfort, with unlimited time to think. Execution is physical and emotionally. It happens in real time, under pressure, with incomplete information and unexpected obstacles. I realized that most strategic failures aren't caused by bad plans, but by poor execution. People spend enormous time and energy developing sophisticated strategies, then implement them carelessly. They focus on what to do, but ignore how to do it. They prepare for ideal conditions, but not for the reality of implementation. This led me to develop what I call execution discipline, the systematic approach to turning plans into results. First, I broke every strategy into specific, measurable actions that could be completed by individuals under pressure. Complex plans with multiple dependencies and unclear responsibilities always failed when tested by reality. Second, I rehearsed everything. We practiced not just the main strategy, but every variation, every contingency, every possible complication. My officers knew their roles so well they could execute them instinctively, even when exhausted, stressed, or surprised. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. Third, I built feedback systems that provided real-time information about execution progress. Plans always require adjustment during implementation, but you can't adjust what you can't measure. I established clear signals, regular check-ins, and rapid communication channels that allowed me to understand and respond to implementation challenges immediately. Most importantly, I learned to maintain strategic thinking while adapting to tactical reality. The temptation during execution is to abandon your strategy when you encounter obstacles. But obstacles are normal. They're why you need strategy in the first place. The key is maintaining your core objectives while adapting your methods based on what actually works. In your modern world, execution discipline is even more crucial because most people are better at planning than implementing. They set great goals, develop detailed plans, and then fail to follow through consistently. The gap between intention and action is where most dreams die. The secret is building systems that make execution easier than avoidance. Instead of relying on motivation or willpower, create structures that naturally guide you toward consistent action. Instead of trying to remember everything, create checklists and procedures that ensure nothing is forgotten. Execution also requires accepting that perfect is the enemy of good. You can't wait for ideal conditions or perfect plans. You must execute with the resources you have, the information you have, the skills you have, and the time you have. Perfect execution of an imperfect plan beats perfect planning with poor execution every time. Even perfect execution requires strong allies. You cannot win alone in warfare, and you cannot win alone in life. I learned this during a campaign where my tactical brilliance and strategic vision meant nothing because I lacked the allies necessary to execute my plans. The most perfect strategy is worthless if you don't have people willing and able to help you implement it. My circle of trust medallion represented the bonds that made strategic alliances unbreakable. But I learned that building these alliances required more than just mutual benefit. It required understanding what each person truly valued and ensuring that helping you helped them achieve their own objectives. The breakthrough came when I stopped thinking about what I needed from others and started thinking about what others needed from me. Instead of asking, "How can you help me win?" I began asking, "How can I help you win?" This shift in perspective transformed every relationship from transactional to strategic. I discovered that the strongest alliances are built on complementary strengths, not similar capabilities. I didn't need allies who could do what I could do, what I couldn't do. A brilliant strategist paired with a gifted communicator and a skilled administrator creates a force multiplier that no individual can match. The art of building strategic alliances lies in identifying mutual interests that go beyond immediate transactions. Surface-level partnerships dissolve under pressure because they're based on convenience rather than shared purpose. Deep alliances survive conflicts because they're based on aligned long-term interests. I learned to invest in relationships before I needed them. The worst time to build an alliance is when you desperately need help. By then, you're negotiating from weakness and offering partnerships that look more like rescue operations. Strong alliances are built during good times, when you can offer value rather than just requesting it. But alliances also require careful selection. Not everyone who wants to help you should be allowed to help you. Some people create more problems than they solve. Others have good intentions, but lack the capability to deliver results. Still others have their own agendas that conflict with your objectives. I developed 3 criteria for selecting allies: capability, reliability, and character. Capability means they can actually do what needs to be done. Reliability means they will do it consistently, even when it's difficult or inconvenient. Character means they will maintain their commitments even when circumstances change or better opportunities appear. The most sophisticated form of alliance building is creating networks where everyone benefits from everyone else's success. Instead of building individual relationships, you build interconnected systems where helping one person helps multiple people. This creates powerful incentives for mutual support and makes the entire network stronger than any individual relationship. In your modern world, strategic alliances are even more crucial because success increasingly depends on collaboration across different areas of expertise. No one person can master all the skills needed to succeed in complex environments. You need technical specialists, relationship builders, creative thinkers, and practical implementers working together toward shared objectives. But remember that loyalty must be earned and maintained, not just expected. People support those who support them, but they also abandon those who take support for granted. Strong alliances require ongoing investment, regular communication, and consistent demonstration that you value the relationship beyond its immediate utility. The key insight is that strategic alliances aren't about using people. They're about creating situations where everyone wins by working together. When you make others more successful, they make you more successful. When you help others achieve their goals, they help you achieve yours. Building alliances also means accepting that you will sometimes fail, and strong alliances help you recover from inevitable defeats. My greatest defeat became my greatest teacher. I lost more than a battle that I lost confidence, reputation, and nearly my life. But in that crushing failure, I discovered principles that made all my future victories possible. The scar I carry from that defeat became more valuable than any trophy from my victories. The battle seemed winnable. My strategy was sound, my preparation was thorough, and my troops were motivated. But I had made a critical error that I didn't recognize until it was too late. I had assumed that my enemy would react predictably to my moves, when in reality, he had anticipated my strategy and prepared counters for every action I might take. The defeat was total and humiliating. My army was scattered, my reputation was damaged, and my confidence was shattered. In that moment of complete failure, I faced a choice that would define the rest of my military career. I could make excuses and blame external factors, or I could learn from what had happened and become stronger. I chose to learn. I spent months analyzing every decision, every assumption, every moment where I could have chosen differently. I studied not just what went wrong, but why I had made the choices that led to disaster. I discovered that my defeat wasn't caused by bad luck or superior enemy forces, which was caused by flaws in my thinking that I had never recognized. The most important lesson was that failure provides information that success cannot. Victory often masks weaknesses and reinforces bad habits because the results seem to justify the methods. Defeat strips away illusions and forces you to confront reality. It shows you exactly where your strategies, skills, and judgment are inadequate. I learned that the art of strategic defeat is knowing when to retreat and how to preserve your forces for future battles. Not every defeat is final, and not every battle is worth winning. Sometimes the wisest strategy is to accept short-term losses to avoid long-term destruction. The ability to retreat strategically is as important as the ability to advance tactically. This experience taught me to treat every defeat as intelligence gathering. What does this failure tell me about my assumptions? What does it reveal about my blind spots? What can I learn about my opponent's capabilities? How can I use this information to improve my future strategies? The key insight is that defeats are inevitable, but learning from them is optional. Most people waste their failures by focusing on blame rather than improvement. They get stuck in emotional reactions instead of extracting practical lessons. They let defeats define them instead of using defeats to refine them. In your modern world, this principle is even more crucial because failure happens faster and more frequently. Markets change, technologies evolve, and competitive landscapes shift rapidly. The strategies that worked yesterday may fail tomorrow. Your ability to learn from defeats and adapt quickly determines your long-term success more than your ability to avoid failures. But remember that learning from defeat requires emotional discipline. You must be able to analyze failures objectively, without defensiveness or self-pity. You must extract lessons without losing confidence. You must change strategies without abandoning core principles. The scar of wisdom reminds me that defeats teach us, but controlling emotions determines whether we learn. The most important battle you will ever fight is the one inside your own mind. I learned this during the siege of a mountain fortress, where external enemies were less dangerous than the fear, doubt, and anger that threatened to destroy my judgment. From within, my calm mind crystallia, perfectly clear stone that remained, transparent regardless of the chaos surrounding it. reminded me that emotional control is your greatest strategic weapon. While others lose their clarity under pressure, the person who maintains inner calm can see opportunities that panic and emotion hide. For 3 months, we had been trapped in that fortress with dwindling supplies and increasing desperation. Every day brought new challenges, new fears, and new reasons to lose hope. I watched strong men become paralyzed by worry, brave soldiers become reckless from anger, and wise advisors become useless from overthinking. I realized that the enemy outside our walls was winning not through superior force, but by triggering our internal enemy's fear, anger, desperation, and doubt. These emotions were doing more damage to our defensive capabilities than any external attack could accomplish. That night, I began what became a lifelong practice of inner warfare, the systematic discipline of controlling my emotional responses to external circumstances. I learned that you cannot control what happens to you, but you can absolutely control how you respond to what happens to you. The practice involved 3 daily disciplines. First, morning preparation, beginning each day by mentally rehearsing challenges I might face and deciding in advance how I would respond. This prevented emotional reactions by creating logical responses before emotions could interfere. Second, moment-to-moment awareness, constantly monitoring my emotional state and adjusting my responses before they became automatic. The moment I felt anger rising, fear growing, or doubt creeping in, I would pause and choose my response consciously rather than reacting unconsciously. Third, evening reflection, analyzing each day's emotional responses to identify patterns, triggers, and areas for improvement. This built self-awareness and emotional intelligence that made future challenges easier to handle. The breakthrough came when I realized that emotions are information, not instructions. Fear tells you that something might be dangerous. It doesn't tell you to run. Anger tells you that something seems unfair. It doesn't tell you to attack. Doubt tells you that something is uncertain. It doesn't tell you to quit. By treating emotions as intelligence rather than commands, I could use their information while maintaining strategic control over my responses. Fear became caution, anger became determination, and doubt became careful analysis. This inner mastery transformed my external effectiveness. When others became emotional, I became calmer. When situations became chaotic, I became clearer. When pressure increased, I became more focused. This gave me enormous advantages in negotiations, conflicts, and decision-making in your modern world. Mastering your inner battlefield is even more crucial because you face constant emotional manipulation. News, media, social platforms, workplace, politics, and competitive pressures are all designed to trigger emotional responses that benefit others rather than you. The person who maintains emotional control in emotional environments has an almost unfair advantage. While others react, you respond. While others become defensive, you remain strategic. While others lose their composure, you maintain your clarity. But emotional control doesn't mean emotional suppression. It means emotional intelligence. It's understanding your emotions, accepting them as normal human responses, and choosing how to express them in ways that serve your objectives rather than sabotage them. The daily practices that build inner strength are simple but not easy. Meditation, reflection, physical exercise, and conscious response training. These practices build emotional resilience the same way physical exercise builds physical strength through consistent effort over time. Inner mastery prepares you for life's greatest strategic challenges. The bridge between ancient wisdom and modern challenges is built on a simple truth. Human nature hasn't changed in 2,500 years. The same principles that won ancient wars can win modern workplace battles, relationship conflicts, and personal struggles. The battlefield has changed, but the strategic principles remain eternal. My bridge of ages connects the wisdom I learned on ancient battlefields to the challenges you face in conference rooms, social situations, and competitive environments. Let me show you exactly how these timeless principles apply to your modern life. In career advancement, strategic positioning means never accepting roles that don't build toward your long-term objectives. Just as I chose battlefields that gave me natural advantages, you should choose opportunities that leverage your natural strengths and interests. Don't just take any promotion, take promotions that position you for the next promotion after that. The principle of knowing yourself and your enemy transforms into understanding your professional strengths and your competitive landscape. Study your industry the way I studied opposing armies. Who were the key players? What motivates them? What are their strengths and blind spots? How can you position yourself to be indispensable to their success? Winning without fighting becomes the art of making collaboration more attractive than competition. Instead of directly challenging rivals, make them want to work with you. Instead of competing for recognition, become the person who recognizes others. Instead of fighting for resources, become the person who helps others get resources. In relationship dynamics, the SPY network principle becomes building genuine connections that provide mutual value. Cultivate relationships across different industries, age groups, and backgrounds, not to use people, but to understand perspectives and opportunities you couldn't see alone. Strong networks are built on giving value, not extracting it. The lightning strike principle applies to seizing opportunities before others recognize them. When you see a chance to solve a problem, volunteer for a challenging project or connect with an influential person. Move quickly. Most opportunities have short windows, and hesitation costs more than imperfection. Strategic deception in modern contexts means managing information to protect your interests. You don't have to reveal your full strategy in job interviews, salary negotiations, or competitive situations. Present yourself authentically but strategically emphasize strengths that are relevant to your objectives. In business environments, the adaptation principle means staying flexible while maintaining core values. Markets change, technologies evolve, and organizational structures shift. The companies and individuals who survive are those who can change their methods while preserving their essential purpose and character. Financial decisions benefit enormously from strategic thinking. Instead of just budgeting month to month, think in terms of long-term positioning. Where will your financial choices today position you 5 years from now? How can you build assets that create options rather than just meeting current needs? The alliance building principle transforms into creating win-win relationships in every area of life. Look for ways to help others achieve their goals while achieving yours. The strongest partnerships are built on mutual benefit, not just mutual affection. Social situations become strategic environments where the principles of reading people, timing, and positioning determine outcomes. Learn to recognize social dynamics, influence through understanding rather than force, and position yourself as someone others want to include, rather than someone they feel obligated to tolerate. Even personal habits and daily routines benefit from strategic thinking. Instead of trying to change everything at once, identify the key behaviors that will create cascading improvements. Focus on high-leverage changes that make other positive changes easier and more natural. The execution principle applies to turning personal goals into consistent daily actions. Perfect planning without consistent implementation is worthless. Build systems that make success easier than failure, and measure progress through actions taken rather than just results achieved. Most importantly, the inner battlefield principle means maintaining emotional control and clear thinking regardless of external circumstances. In our hyper-connected, always-on world, the ability to remain calm and strategic while others become reactive and emotional is an enormous competitive advantage. These timeless principles are now yours to wield. The eternal flame of wisdom has burned for 2,500 years, passed from one strategic mind to another, growing brighter with each generation that applies these principles to new challenges. Today, I pass this flame to you, along with the responsibility that comes with strategic knowledge. Power without wisdom is destruction. Strategy without ethics is manipulation. Victory without honor is meaningless. As you apply these principles to your modern challenges, remember that true strategic thinking serves life, growth, and mutual benefit, don't just personal advantage. I have shared with you the deepest insights from a lifetime of strategic thinking, the importance of self-knowledge, the power of positioning, the art of timing, the strength of alliances, and the discipline of emotional control. These aren't just tactics for getting ahead, they're principles for creating value, building relationships, and contributing to something larger than yourself. The responsibility that comes with this knowledge is significant. You now understand how to influence others, how to position yourself advantageously, and how to achieve objectives through strategic thinking rather than force. This power must be used ethically. Help others win while you win. Create value while capturing value. Build up rather than tear down. Your strategic legacy begins with how you apply these principles in your daily life. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to demonstrate strategic wisdom. Every challenge becomes a chance to choose response over reaction. Every relationship becomes a possibility for mutual benefit rather than zero-sum competition. But legacy extends beyond personal success to the impact you have on others. The greatest strategic victory is inspiring others to think strategically. When you model calm under pressure, others learn emotional control. When you seek win-win solutions, others learn collaborative thinking. When you position yourself through value creation rather than political maneuvering, others learn authentic influence. I challenge you to become a teacher of strategic thinking, not through formal instruction, but through daily example. Show others what it looks like to think several moves ahead, to remain calm under pressure, to build alliances based on mutual benefit, and to adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining core principles. The ultimate test of strategic wisdom is whether it makes you more effective and more ethical simultaneously. If your strategic thinking leads you to manipulate others, you're using tactics without wisdom. If it leads you to create value for others while achieving your own objectives, you're applying true strategic principles. Remember that the goal of strategy isn't to dominate others. It's to position yourself where you can contribute most effectively to outcomes that benefit everyone involved. The supreme strategic victory is creating situations where helping others achieve their goals becomes the best way to achieve your own goals. Your journey with these principles has just begun. Each situation you face becomes an opportunity to apply strategic thinking. Each challenge becomes a chance to practice these disciplines. Each relationship becomes a laboratory for testing these concepts. The ancient wisdom I've shared with you will evolve as you apply it to your unique circumstances, your specific challenges, and your particular opportunities. You will discover new applications, develop personal variations, and create innovations that serve your modern context while honoring timeless principles. 25 centuries ago, I wrote that the supreme excellence is to subdue your enemy without fighting. Today, I challenge you to achieve the supreme excellence of modern strategic thinking, to succeed without creating enemies, to win while helping others win, and to build a legacy that strengthens everyone it touches. The eternal flame of strategic wisdom now burns in your hands. Use it wisely, share it generously, and pass it forward brighter than you received it. The strategic journey is yours to walk. Begin today.